Hey, and welcome to another cinematography breakdown. And this is going to be a big one, because last year we shot a big commercial campaign for an even bigger online poker website. Over the course of 7 consecutive days, in 2 locations, we shot more than 140 videos. And this included explainer videos, portrait content, mini documentaries, and many more. Unfortunately, I can't show you the full finished video because it hasn't been released yet, but when comparing my last interview breakdowns views to the one of the actual documentary, I think it's safe to say that you care more about how we got there than the actual video, which is fine, and this is what we're here for. So in this video we will go over everything: the location, how we captured the audio, all of our camera equipment, how we set up the lighting, as well as a little bit of the editing. Before we started the actual project, we had a concept shoot. So we rented out a location and shot about 4 videos, edited them, and then sent them to the client for them to approve. And they really liked our location, so we booked it again for the entirety of the shoot. And I really like this location because it has this industrial but still vintage modern vibe, and I think it fit our scene perfectly. I mention this a lot in my videos. The location is one of the most important things. So if you can get your clients to pay for a high quality location, that can make such a huge difference. When it came to the framing of our subject, since this was an explainer video and no typical interview setup, we wanted him to face directly into the camera. Therefore, we wanted to have him dead center and not framed off to the side, which we usually do when shooting an interview. Since the location had these gorgeous large windows, we definitely wanted to keep them in frame. Not only because it looks good, but also because it gave us some motivation for our key light, but I will talk about this later. Since the shoot was for an online poker site, we also rented a poker table to give the whole production a bit more context. We then also moved some furniture around to make the background a bit more interesting, like the couch on the camera right and the plants on the camera left. But here it was important that it wasn't too distracting and the main focus was still on our subject. We also made sure that it was sitting right in the middle and being centered by our industrial beams. Not only helped this put more focus onto our subject, but it also gave an interesting dark and light pattern like I'm always talking about in my videos, and breaking up the background and not making it look flat. The same was true for the wall in the background, because not only was it painted in 2 colors and gave us a bit more color contrast and again our dark and light pattern, but it also provided us with a leading line towards our subject. We also made sure to have all of our practicals in the shot because they also made for a nice color contrast, and I just liked them as some more interesting points in our background. And all of them were already there and they were just part of the location, except for this old looking lamp that is on our camera left, because I also wanted to use this for a more interesting shot, as well as for motivating our hair light. Again, talking about this in the light section, but overall I was really happy with the framing of our subject here. Same is true for our second close-up angle, because the existing structure of our location had him framed nicely in the middle of our shot. As the next part, let's talk a bit about the crew that made this whole project possible. So first of all, this wasn't necessarily your traditional film set, where everybody had an assigned role and didn't deviate from it. Most of us were wearing multiple hats, in my case quite literally. Starting with me, I was producing, directing, some were taking over the role as a DP, but mostly directing and producing. Next up, we had Belle and Franco, and they were doing many things. They were basically switching in and out of roles of the DP, the first AC, camera operator, a bit of audio, and a bit of gaffer as well. And then we had Clelia, and she had the job of the production assistant, meaning a little bit of everything. She was moving around equipment, she was helping with the teleprompter, ordering food, and just helped out wherever she was needed. And then as our last crew member, we had Tati, and she was there the entire week for hair and makeup. Since we're a team that is used to working together on so many different jobs, it actually worked out fine that nobody had an assigned role, that they stuck to it. But on different sets, and if you have outsiders coming in, it's definitely highly recommended that everybody has their assigned role. And then we had our 3 subjects that were actually delivering the content, and all 3 of those are ambassadors for the online poker site, and they're also Twitch streamers, so we didn't need to hire actual professional actors, and they did an amazing job. And since they actually know what they're talking about, it was quite easy. Now let's move on to the camera equipment. Since all of these videos were between 3 and 10 minutes long, we needed 2 cameras to be able to switch between different angles. Not only does the second angle make the whole thing a little bit more interesting for the viewer, but whenever we had a cut in our text, we were able to seamlessly hide it with a different angle. And here we used two Canon C70s with a speed booster. Our main angle was on a Sigma 35 1.4 and we shot everything wide open for a nice blurry background and a separation from our subject to the background. And our close-up angle was on a motorized slider on a Sigma 85mm 1.4. We decided to put the close-up on a motorized slider just to add a bit more production value and have it look a little bit more interesting. On top of our lenses, we used Pro Mist filters, both at 1/8 strength. That gave the highlights a bit more gloom, made the whole image less contrasty, which I think was the right choice for this vintage location, and we also have a bit nicer skin tones. We also used a teleprompter for our subjects to deliver their lines. Sometimes they freestyled, but the majority of the shoot was actually being read off a teleprompter. I don't know the exact camera settings for this shot. As I've already mentioned, we shot multiple of these videos on different kind of days and we always had to change our camera settings because there was a lot of light coming in from the window that we couldn't control. The exposure settings in our cameras were obviously completely different when we started shooting early in the morning compared to when we shot late at night. But the one thing that I can tell you is that we always exposed for our background first, so that we didn't blow out the window on our camera right and we had an even exposure throughout our entire location. And then to level it out, we added our own lights, but again, later in the video. Next up, let's talk a bit about the audio. And we didn't have a dedicated sound guy on set because all of our shots were static. Having shot tons of interviews myself as a one-man band or in a small crew, and we didn't have any subjects that were moving, I think you can get away by just setting up the audio yourself and therefore saving money on a dedicated sound guy. Especially with the equipment that we used, and I will tell you why. We used a stationary boom mic, and the microphone that we used is the Day DS Mic 2S, and this is a small shotgun microphone and that helps out in large spaces that have a lot of echo and are perfect for speech. This was set up on a boom pole and a light stand and went directly into a Zoom F6 recorder. The Zoom F6 records in 32-bit float, and this is kinda like recording RAW but for audio. This means even if you have a subject that is sometimes speaking a little louder and then they're a little bit quieter and your levels aren't even, you can just even this out in post easily without losing any quality. This means you don't necessarily have to have a person that is monitoring the audio the entire time and constantly changing levels, because you can do all of this in post. Since we had more than 140 videos to shoot, we decided to go with a one microphone setup and control the audio after every video was done, instead of having a two microphone setup, one lavalier and one shotgun microphone, like I usually do on big important interviews. All of our cameras, as well as our shotgun microphone, were all synced up via timecode. And we used our Tentacle syncs for this. And this makes it so much easier when you have to create a multicam sequence in post and then sync up all of your different angles as well as your audio. And if you want to check out any of the equipment that we used in this video, I will link all of the equipment down in the description below. One very important reason why this project looked so high quality are the plugins for MotionVFX. Not only did I use a lot of the plugins for this project, but I've been using the plugins on my YouTube channel and all of my commercial work for years. From cinematic titles, motion graphics, film overlays, and even 3D tracking, MotionVFX has everything you need to level up your video editing. Not only are the plugins easy to use, they're also fully customizable, so you can just adjust them to whatever your client wants. You can also adjust a lot of the plugins for horizontal as well as vertical mode, which was invaluable for this project to keep a consistent look throughout the entire ad campaign. And just like I said, I've been using their plugins for years on this channel and all of my client work, so I was really happy for them to reach out and ask to sponsor this video, and I will put some links to my favorite personal plugins down in the description below. Now we can already move on to the part of how we lit this scene, and this is for me always the most exciting part. As I've already mentioned, we had a couple of light sources that we couldn't control, mainly the huge window on our camera right. This was a really nice diffused light that was filling up the room and made everything look really natural. The light coming in from the outside changed a bit between 5600 Kelvin all the way to maybe 7000 Kelvin, depending on if it was cloudy outside, raining, or if there was just the pure sunlight coming in. To make our scene more interesting, we added some color contrast by powering up all of the practicals in the room. Those were all tungsten light bulbs, and their color temperature ranges between 2700 Kelvin and 3200 Kelvin, and we couldn't control either the intensity or the color temperature. We also found this old film light that was already in the location, so we decided to also place it in the background to make the whole scene a bit more interesting and also add motivation for our hair light. Speaking of hair light, to separate our subject from the background a bit more, we used a COB light with a small parabolic softbox. The light that we used here is a SmallRig RC120B, and this is a COB bicolor light, and this came in really handy because we wanted to make it look like the light is coming from our practicals in the room, so we could set the color temperature to 3000 Kelvin and therefore giving off this warm rim light to our subject. And for our key light, we wanted to make it look like our subject is being lit by the window on our camera right. In order to achieve this, we needed a big soft light source, and here we used my Intellitek Mega Light Cloth 2.0. This is a 3 by 4.5 foot light mat, and this one is incredible and I use it on a lot of my shoots, and I have a full review on my channel if you're more interested about this light mat. We placed our key light in a 45-degree angle towards our subject, and this gave off the illusion that the light is wrapping around from the window lights outside. This also gave us a really nice highlight to shadow roll off, creating this little triangle of light on the dark side of our subject's face. And this is also called a Rembrandt lighting. To sell the illusion of him being illuminated by the window light coming in even more, we set the color temperature of our key light to 5600 Kelvin, and we also set the white balance of all of our cameras to 5600 Kelvin. And with this we created this natural looking key light that also matches the color temperature from the window light spilling into the location. On our camera left we had this really nice brick wall, but it was a little too dark because there wasn't enough natural light coming onto our wall, and we wanted to raise the exposure here a little bit, so we added another light. Here we used a Godox VL300 with just a reflector, and we pointed it directly towards the wall, therefore raising the exposure. And this was it for the lighting. Relatively simple but very effective, but our location also played a huge role into this. Last but not least, let's talk a bit about the editing, and let's start with the color grading. Since we knew we had to edit more than 140 videos, we wanted to make it look as good as possible in camera already, with lighting and set design. So now all we had to do is add a simple color correction, leveling out the exposure, adding some contrast and a bit of saturation, and then add one of our custom LUTs. And the one that we used here is called Bluebird from our Canon version 2 pack, but it's also included in our Blackmagic version 2 pack and in the Sony LUT pack. To make our life a lot easier, we threw all of the corresponding clips into one bin and then added it to a multicam sequence. This multicam sequence consists of our audio and our two camera angles, and we can just easily sync them via timecode. So now in the edit we can easily switch between both of the angles and everything is synced perfectly within our editor. And this works in Final Cut, DaVinci as well as Premiere. Now after syncing up our multicam sequence and adding a color grade, we had to fix our audio a bit because the room was really large with high ceilings and we had a bit of an echo in there. The first thing we had to do is add a simple voiceover enhancement and correct the audio levels. Then to fight the echo in our shot, we used a plugin called Echo Remover AI by CrumplePop. And the last thing we had to do was just a simple audio denoise correction, also via a plugin from CrumplePop, and it's called Audio Denoise AI. And here's a before and after.
Bewusste Tells sind Zeichen, die ein Spieler im Rahmen einer Strategie selbst initiiert. Bewusste Tells sind Zeichen, die ein Spieler im Rahmen einer Strategie selbst initiiert.
So there you have it. This was the full cinematography breakdown of one of our higher budget projects. And if you want to see more from this project, especially the interviews, then let me know down in the comments below. And speaking of interviews, have you checked out the interview breakdown I did with the exact opposite, only one light in a small location? If not, then maybe do so right now and subscribe for more. And I hope to see you on the next one.